Madam Clerk, would you please go over Resolution 7A, please?
A resolution authorizing the waiver of all fees for Bridge Christian Church Movies in the Park at Dark event at Heritage Park on Friday, August 10th, 2018, for a total amount of $925.
Okay. No questions? 7B, please.
A resolution authorizing the waiver of all fees for Bridge Christian Church Movies in the Park at Dark event at Heritage Park on Friday, September 21st, 2018, for the total amount of $925.
Any
question.
questions?
No
No
question.
question. Okay, thank you, Councilman. Okay, at this time, we will have a quarterly report from the Fire and Police Pension. Thank you, sir, and welcome.
Thank you. Good to be back. Thank you all. Before we get started, I just want to recognize a contingent, our chairman, Charlie Thomason from the Fire Department, our administrator, Katrina Abbott, and our deputy administrator, Christina Culpepper. Thank you for being here today. You all have probably received our written report for the quarter. I'll just touch on some of the highlights. We did have a negative report in the first quarter, net of fees minus 0.2%, so pretty close to flat. The good news is that's better than our benchmark, and it was actually better than the S&P 500 in the first quarter, which was down about 0.4, 0.5%. So markets go up and down. We actually, according to plan this time, went down a little less than the market did. So that's good news. As you know, last year was quite strong, 12.5%. And so far for the trailing 12 months, we still have a net return of about 8%, which exceeds our target rate of return. So all things considered, it was a decent quarter. I want to highlight a couple of important progress points. We have been reallocating assets, and we finally arrived at our target, which is 65% what you would call risk assets, equities and so forth, and 35% what we might call safe assets. It will be bonds and other low-risk assets. So we're right on target. I think that's a huge accomplishment. Significantly, we have just completed the 10th year of writing down the tremendous losses from the 2008 financial crisis. I think most of us remember what a fun year that was, including the pension plan. So we opted at that time to smooth that out over 10 years to try to reduce the impact on any given year. That's behind us now officially. Going forward, we've adopted 5-year smoothing. So it's a huge accomplishment. It's nice to have that behind us. We won't have that drag on our performance going forward. Really important. Secondly, we adopted a slightly reduced actuarial rate of return. We dropped it from 7.5% to 7.25% for the 2018 plan year. Again, the intention is to move towards what we consider a more really reasonable and representative rate of return and not to overstate it going forward. So with that, I will thank you for your time and see if there are any questions.
Any question, Council? Councilman Ledford.
Hey, Chris, last year I'd asked about the 7.5%.
Yes.
Now the 7.25. Is that based in numbers, factual reality, or is that more of a comprehensive overview in regards to expectations?
Yeah, I think to answer your question, I'll back up just a step or two, but I think more the latter. It was common for pension plans in the early 2000s to have unreasonably high expected rates of return. 8.5, even 9% was not unheard of. Obviously, that didn't materialize, but that number is the actuarial target. That's the number on which the plan is valued on an actuarial basis. So it really made sense to begin to reduce that towards what we considered a more reasonable and attainable rate of return. So considering that the average rate of return for stock assets is 8 or 9%, and these are balanced portfolios, something less than that was appropriate. We've ratcheted down gradually from 7.75% maybe at one time to 7.5 to 7.25. So that's the benchmark rate around which the actuaries do their work to value the plan. Based on that actuarial rate and based on the actual market value of the assets, the plan is approximately 51% funded.
Do you foresee that number changing or dropping in the future based on performance levels?
Well, I think we'd all, I'm going to speak out of school, I think we'd kind of like to see that number around 7%. Obviously, the lower, the better from an actuarial standpoint, but the lower, the worse from a current funding standpoint.
Right.
The lower that rate is, the greater contribution we ask from city council and from employees. So it's always a trade-off, but I think we've all learned our lessons, or we hope we have, through the pension crises of the 90s and the 2000s, that unreasonably high rates of return just cause greater pain later on. And I commend council, by the way. I was reviewing records going back the last 10 years of the funding level has been essentially the requested level that was required to hit that funding and amortize those losses over time. So we've been right on target.
Chris, thank you so much for you and your team for all the hard work you've done. I think we owe you gratitude, and thank you for your
Thank you very
service.
much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Seeing there's no other question, thank you so much for all your hard work. I echo Councilman Ledford's and the team. Obviously, it takes a team to make things like this happen. So thank you very much. Okay. At this time now, we will have a departmental report from Human Resources. Somebody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
In our time together today, what I'd like to be able to share with the council in this body today is more so my vision for human resources and also the strategy, which I refer to as a people strategy for the city of Chattanooga moving forward. Now, this particular strategy, it is our belief that as it was developed, that it does support the core missions and values of the city of Chattanooga to ensure that all of our employees and those in the community are able to live the life that they want, be bigger and better and stronger in all of the endeavors that they put forth. And so the goals and the information that you'll hear are based off of those principles. Thank you. Next slide, please. Now, our vision, building competitive advantage through people. Over the next 5 years, the city of Chattanooga, local government, and our community, we are going to continue to really see some profound changes. We've already experienced changes with not only technology, but new businesses and industries coming to the city, but also the migration of other people and communities that come into Chattanooga to help strengthen and grow the city. But in that vein, what also is apparent to us is that we're going to experience and are experiencing a labor shortage, and this is not just in Chattanooga, but this is all over. The city of Chattanooga, within the next 5 years, we have approximately about 20% of our workforce that would be retirement eligible. Now, granted, all 20% may not retire at one time, but we need to begin planning for their attrition from the city. And so that's really going to challenge us, especially ensuring that we're able to hire the best, attract the best. So that means that we have to take different approaches. In addition to that, some other demographic changes, such as the fact that our workforce and our communities are aging. People are not only living longer, but they're working longer, and we are needing to ensure that we completely understand all the needs of all the constituents and employees that are wishing and wanting to work for the city of Chattanooga so that we could develop processes and systems to help support. So the strategy that we have developed actually has 9 goals that are going to be in the area of 4 key themes. Next slide, please. These 4 themes are in the area of recruitment and retention, talent management, rewards and recognition, and building a thriving and inclusive community. Collectively, we call this the people strategy. Next slide, please. So under the area of recruitment and retention, We want to ensure, our goal is to, one, ensure that we are hiring and retaining the best talent. What that means for us is that we've got to make sure that we have competencies and processes and an environment to be able to be attractive to those interested in coming to work for the city. Our second goal is that we are going to review our current processes around how we recruit, how we advertise, and ensure that we have a fair, rigorous, agile, and professional process. And our third goal under this category is that we're going to provide induction and career support so that when someone comes on board, they have the best possible start from the beginning. In the area of talent management, go for basically offering those professional and career development processes for an employee throughout the life of their career here with the city. So from the time they step into the door to the time that they're ready to exit the city of Chattanooga, we want to ensure that we know where they're wanting to go professionally, that we understand what their development needs are so that they can continue to be engaged and be able to perform to the highest. And our fifth goal in this category is recognizing the achievements and recognizing their achievements and providing structured routes to progress their careers. So as an example, if someone goes back to school and let's say they get a degree or they get certification in a certain area or they have an interest of working in a different area, we want to make sure that we're able to provide those avenues and guidance so that they're able to achieve their desires for their career growth. In the area of rewards and recognition, the goal is to recognize and reward people fairly, competitively, with appropriate and transparent compensation frameworks. And so what that means is that's a lot broader than just how much we're paying individuals. We're wanting to ensure that they have we have a total rewards approach to that. So looking at their benefits, looking at what their family needs may be relative to how they balance work and their home life. So we want to make sure that the processes and the practices that we bring into the city, that they represent all the needs of the people that work here in city government as well as in the local community. And then next, we are moving forward with our compensation study. Now that study will take a look at all of the general plan positions here in the city, as well as our desire is for it to help us to be able to design and implement a stronger approach moving forward for more sustainability in regards of being competitive relative to our pay and benefits for the city of Chattanooga. The last theme, building a thriving and inclusive community. The goals here is to ensure that we are creating the right culture that is inclusive, that is basically set up where it's positive, it's fair, and that everyone's voice is able to be heard and respected. In order to do that, that means that we need to involve everyone. We need to be able to not just count numbers, count head count, but we really need to get to know the individuals that work for us, understand their needs, understand what they need from their family, from the family standpoint, and build that into our practices and processes. In addition to that, we'll be promoting an environment where health and well-being is actively promoted. And health and well-being, obviously, sometimes we think about the physical activity, but we're also thinking about mental health and also other stresses that may come with that. We're wanting to ensure that we're creating the environment where every contribution can be heard and valued, and that our employees are engaged. And the final is to continue to embed inclusive and family-friendly principles throughout everything that we do. Some initiatives that we are undertaking for fiscal year 19. One, we will deploy an employee engagement survey. This particular survey will be for all the employees of the city. It is a way that we'll be able to engage, to understand the engagement of our employees, as well as ensuring that we have the right resources available to them so that they can be successful. In addition to that, we're currently working on a leadership development program that will be rolled out this year as well. This particular program will take into account any what I would term frontline leadership type roles, as well as managerial and executive leadership. There will be something for everyone, as well as programs for those that are not in leadership. As a way for us to collect feedback in terms of how we're performing collectively, we will be piloting a 360-degree feedback process. That pilot will go out within the next month or so, and we have targeted a particular group within city government to start and collect some feedback from, and after that, we will then be deploying it to other areas of the city as interest, as interest arises. Next, one of the main things that I know that everyone has been waiting for is the policy enhancements for our employee information guide. We currently have an implementation plan for that is already underway. The council, we have a date that we have identified that we will come and ensure that we're educating each and every one of you. So we'll continue to roll that out as well as for the departments and administrators in the various areas. So we'll be asking for your support sometime very soon. Last but surely not least, we'll also roll out a diversity and inclusion education plan. This particular plan will entail things such as how do we value diversity, understanding what does building an inclusive environment really means for the city and for each of us, as well as how do we ensure that we put into play processes and structures in our current system that are open, that are free of bias, and allows everyone to be able to contribute and move forward. So all of these things, all of these initiatives are undertakings that the HR team will be leading, but by no means owning solely. We'll be counting on each and every department within the city and, of course, City Council to help support us in these efforts as we roll those out. That concludes my report. I will be open to any questions or comments that you all have.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions if I can, just going through the presentation, if I may.
Yes.
And I may have to dance around a little bit, so forgive me.
Okay.
One of the items that I noticed in reviewing the budget this year was hospitalization. It was
Okay.
a substantial increase every year. In some departments, it was $150,000. And we received reasons for that, for whatever reason it was. But in hospitalization, in our healthcare costs, what are we doing? This might be a question in our benefits premiums. What are we doing to find and lower those premiums? What efforts is the city making?
I'm going to defer to a couple of my support teams for that answer, okay?
Okay. And I think benefits was Madeline, so I forget.
Yes, and
Sorry, I should
Madeline is
direct
here,
that.
so. Thank you.
Well, as you know, or I think everybody knows, a lot of the cost for our healthcare have to do with pharmacy cost. Pharmacy costs across the country are really out of control, and they're currently about 28% of our pharmacy cost. So our on-site pharmacy does it helps to hold down the cost of that by allowing us to purchase our drugs at acquisition cost. It allows us to have those lower copays. So that is one part of what we're doing. The on-site clinic is another part. We're initiating our wellness programs to try to help employees and their families to know what their risk factors are and try to get them into some programs, proactively to hold down the cost of health care. We do have different networks with Blue Cross that offer different discount structures. You may have noticed this year we have an incentive for our employees to go to what's called Network S, where we do get a different percentage of discount. That was a choice that we could make, but we're trying to do those types of things. But unfortunately, the cost of health care is rising everywhere.
Yes, it is, and I think some of us know why. So, also, when you talk about the employee health and wellness, what are we doing? How are we tracking this? Its benefits.
What aspect? I'm not
You
sure.
mentioned the health and wellness program. I'm just curious as to, is this voluntary? Is this something that, are we looking at everybody? I don't understand how one gets into the program.
For the wellness program?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, it is voluntary, but there is a lot of outreach that goes on, not only with our on-site clinic, but with Blue Cross itself. So Blue Cross has a health navigator who's actually located at the Well Advantage Center. And she helps our employees in many ways to work on their claims if they have some claims issued. But she's also an advocate for a lot of the programs that Blue Cross has to offer. And then with our on-site clinic, we do have a lot of data analysis that's performed and to identify those employees who do have high risk factors. And they are contacted and they are encouraged to come to the Well Advantage Center to get the comprehensive health review, to try to get them into some wellness programs. And we have really good luck with that. Our engagement rates are very high.
Okay. Still completely voluntary, though.
It is, yes.
So if you contact someone, obviously staying outside of HIPAA laws,
Mm-hmm.
but you contact someone, hey, we found this, or and
Well,
you can't make them do your
No.
wellness program.
absolutely not.
Okay, very good.
No, but we're working on that all the time. We're working with our patients or our
Another
employees.
question, if I may, Ms. Beverly. When you mentioned this equity or the compensation study,
Yes.
and then the diversity inclusion study. Is this the same study that the council just recently funded with the equity study?
Now, I mentioned the compensation study,
Right.
which is the one that's tied to our grades and what we're being paid. The equity study, I believe that you're referencing, is one that the city attorney's office, I believe,
Yes, ma'am.
will be proposing. Now, I did not mention that in my presentation. Did I
Okay, but they're
misunderstand
not
your
the same
question?
study.
No,
More
they're not.
disparity study. They're not going to cross over. We're not basically doing the same work twice.
No.
Okay, thank you. That's what I needed to know. And then you answered my last question, which was for Morrow, and that is any egg changes are going to come before us. Very good, very good. All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford. Councilman Gilbert.
Just to interact with Councilman, but I may have another job dealing with healthcare. You know, healthcare is going up each year. Insurance is going up each year for everybody. And one of the things I think we might want to encourage people to understand that the program that the city does have is a good program. Compared to other corporations inside the city of Chattanooga, they have saved a lot of money. And when it comes to the health center and also the pharmacy they set up, that has saved thousands of dollars by doing the way they do it. So if you'd like to go to other corporations and see what they're doing versus what we're doing, we're really doing a good job at that. So maybe later on in the years we can compare that to some of the corporations that I know that they're doing less and an employee is spending a lot more. So I just want to bring that part up. I heard you saying, I know it's a pet peeve myself too at my other job. I mean, no one want to pay out more money each year, but it is going up each and every year. We need to encourage our Congress and our Senate to start looking into other alternatives where that, in Canada, medication is very cheap. Why? So I think we need to start pushing that direction so we can get lower in our cities.
And if I could just add one other point to everything that you've just said, a lot of the healthcare costs also is related to the experience. So for instance, if someone was on our plan, let's say in my department, and they had a serious health issue, that experience and that cost, sometimes we cannot gauge what that is. It could be basically, it could blow our budget apart because of a surgery or a major illness. And so that will then dictate across the city, if we have situations like that, that will then dictate some various increases or variations in terms of what the percent of increase that we've just received in the prior year. It will affect the years coming, moving forward. So,
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Burrs, please.
Hi.
hello?
Diversity and inclusion is the term of the day. All corporations are using that. So you know this is a loaded question. What does diversity mean?
Now, I'm going to give you the professional answer that I aspire to and teach. So diversity, when you think about the whole person, it means everything from your ethnicity, your personality, your culture, your background, your experience. It could be your education level. it is not everything. So my intent is not to water it down. My point is diversity means difference. Pretty plain and simple, it means difference. And so when I'm referencing diversity and inclusion for the city, I'm not looking at those as separate entities. It's a package, because diversity without having the right environment where it's inclusive and where people do feel valued, it brings no value whatsoever. So you will always hear me say diversity and inclusion.
Okay, so I didn't hear sexual orientation and I didn't hear age.
Those are other characteristics as well that does fall under diversity. So to the point of diversity means difference, think about the individual. It is gender, it is age, it is your thoughts in terms of, are you introverted versus extroverted? It is the experiences that you bring to the table as well. It's a host of other attributes that make up the person.
Okay, that was a very good answer. I really would like for us to be seriously looking at that and to make our employees representative of our city and the various talents, no matter what those other labels bring forward. So I just wanted to put that on record.
Absolutely. So although I did not include it in this report, a part of what HR is also doing is identifying metrics or measures that will continue to gauge progress for the city of Chattanooga. One part of that is how diverse and inclusive really is our workforce. So yes, we have the ability to run numbers today, but again, without the engagement survey and understanding how engaged our employees are, as well as understanding what are the needs, when we have those two, we will be reporting more often on what those numbers look like for the city, as well as if we're talking about how diverse, from a gender or racial mix standpoint we are for the city, definitely we'll report on those numbers as well. But I just want to front end that to say that I don't want us to chase numbers, because that is the philosophy I think that gets us nowhere. But I do want us to make sure that we are being reflective, the city is being reflective of the community, as well as the fact that we're building the right environment, that environment has to be one where employees or even candidates that we're trying to attract want to come here, and also people in the community want to come and live. So that means we've got to put some processes in, whether that's processes or benefits or other initiatives that we take on. It has to take on the inclusive lens to ensure that it's representative of everyone's needs.
May I do one follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely.
When you're looking for an eclectic environment, one of the things, as you know, and this is coming from the Mayor's Council on Women, that what we're looking at is that whole workforce thing, not just for women, for all kinds of people. And one of the things that came to our fore was when you do everything on computer, people may be automatically thrown out because of the assumptions on the people that are pushing the keys. And when we were at Chat State having that whole forum on that, the same thing occurred. Everything is, there's not that face-to-face sort of thing. I hope we won't make the blunder of finding people, quote, overqualified, or do the discriminatory thing of not hiring them because it may cost more for the pension plan, or health insurance might be higher. I think we rule out a lot of people by making assumptions.
Absolutely.
And I would hope, and that's subjective stuff, and I hope that we will seriously take a look at that as well.
We are. So the items that you just addressed, now granted, those are called bias. So granted, I know that on an individual basis, we can't control everyone, especially we need to provide autonomy. But what we can do for the city that would be a part of our diversity and inclusion education plan is to ensure that we're doing bias training. So we've got to educate so that we could mitigate as much of that variation that you're describing as possible. And when we find that there is blatant disregard for the principles and values that we're trying to espouse, we'll deal with those on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. Are we using two different policy books, or the handbook, and then the department heads using a different policy book?
Now, no, we should not be. Let me state it that way. We should not be. Currently, the policy book that is effective for the city of Chattanooga is our employee guide, and I believe the ending date is 2015. That should be the overarching policy book that we should be referring to. And so where there's more detail for clarification, the departments should be referring to the respective whoever is the owner of their respective policy, but for the most part, it would be coming back to HR. Now, what I believe that departments have in place are standard operating procedures. So those operating procedures by no means should supersede our policy guide that we have in place, but they should complement it.
Okay, so if an employee doesn't agree with what the department heads have in place, which policy would they go back to the employee handbook from HR, or do they go by what the department head has put in place?
Well, let me clarify. So I don't want to use the term depend, but it could depend on what the issue is. So in this regard, if we're talking about the general civilian employees, obviously there are guidelines for civilian employees versus sworn. So if there were something that happened that related to sworn employees, then those questions would come back to either fire or police as an example, because they have policies for which HR works in conjunction with them on. If we're speaking of something else that's really a policy and not necessarily a practice in a department, then if it's a practice of perhaps how do I do my job, those types of questions should come to the department. But if we're truly speaking of questions really related to city policy, then those need to be elevated up in terms of the employee guide taking precedence with some clarification, as an example, from HR. So if there was something a policy that HR owned and manages for the city, that employee or that department head could come to HR for clarification, and we would work through those.
So is every employee given the EIG book, or is it just online?
They have an online copy. Now, I don't know if in the past they had the manual copy, but there is an electronic version available. But if there's something that employee, if they don't have access, we definitely can provide them with access to whatever the policy is.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it? Okay. Councilman Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, say as council people, if an employee reaches out to us, a lot of times we have people that reach out and say that they don't agree with something, whether in whatever department it may be, or the way policy has been. Like right now, we have some things that were done in the past back in 1962 that we're looking at. If it's things that have been in policy or been in place that may not fit the mold or may not be good for the morale or whatever the case may be, how do an employee reach out or just speak their truth to say that, hey, we all feel that this needs to change, and make that happen without being reprimanded or being put in a...
Well, first off, there shouldn't be any retaliation for raising a concern for how we make things better.
Right.
So secondly, what I would hope, if we had the right environment, if it was open and the employee were comfortable, depending on whatever the feedback is that they wanted to share, first, I would hope that they could go to their department, to their manager or supervisor to give that suggestion. But if that is not doable, then by all means, my door, my HR team's doors are always open, and so they can reach out to us.
Okay, so that would be just if when the employees or people reaching out to us as council and they have an issue, if they first say, hey, go to your immediate supervisor and explain to them the issue, and if they telling us that's not working, then say, hey, reach out to HR and speak with them and let them know what's going on. And if it's doable, then that change or something could happen. But if not, just the discussion will happen.
Yeah, so either way, so that it can definitely be handled that way, and I would prefer, definitely, I would prefer if, if someone came to you and they couldn't handle it in their department, that you and either yourself or have them reach out to Human Resources. From there, what we would do, we would look at and listen to what the issue is, and if it's something, let's just say someone was recommending a policy change or a practice that we've had in place that's not necessarily conducive to this day and time, then we would put that as a priority, and we would work with the other departments that may be involved to bring about change in that area. But if it is something that's not, then what we would do, similar to what we're doing with the employee guide, we would plan to move forward with looking at what other things we can do to make that area better through policy at the next revision.
Thank you, ma'am.
Councilwoman Coonrod.
Chair, I had
Sure.
a question, another question I just thought about. And I know we done talked about this several times, even before you became the director, but have we looked into what ways that we can get increase of African-American police officers? With this test thing, African-American can't seem to pass this test. Like the questions, are we able to look at what type questions are being asked? What's preventing them from moving forward to get hired and actually, follow through? At one point, we talked about having somebody, reach out to them to say, hey, you taking your test next, or you passed that step, it's time to go take your drug test, or what? Have we put those things in place yet, or what's the next steps to try to, outside of the $500 incentive that I guess nobody's taking advantage of, to try to get more participation from the African American community?
I have a part of response, but I think I'm going to defer, if I could, choose. I'm going to ask the police department to come assist me in this, because some of what you asked is before I came, so I want to make sure that we're at least aligned.
Thank you, Councilwoman Coonrod. We do still have the initiative, even though folks aren't taking advantage of it. Our recruiting division has a couple extra people working with them while they're injured on duty, and we continue our recruiting efforts much like we have in the past. This upcoming academy has almost 40 cadets in it, although I don't know the demographic makeup at this point. I'll be happy to get that for you. For this next academy, the one starting in August, we've got one starting in August. We're hoping to have about 40 cadets. I don't know the demographic makeup, I'm sorry. That'd be awesome. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Future Ready Institutes that they have in some of our Hamilton County schools. Chief Scruggs and I are participating with Brainerd High School. They've implemented a public safety portion for their Future Ready Institute. So the students have the opportunity to take the public safety pathway into law enforcement, fire science, or emergency medical technicians. So we're hoping that'll do us some good as well. And we'll be working with those kids, from what I understand, for several years, because I believe they start in middle school. They have to choose a path, and whichever path they choose, that Chief Scruggs and I will walk them through that up to the point where they'll be ready to seek employment somewhere, hopefully, after college. You're welcome.
Well, she said something about China, but Brainerd is my district, so I'm glad you're doing a lot in Brainerd. Thank you.
With that being said, Councilman Byrd.
I just kind of want to piggyback off something that heard Councilwoman Coonrod said, that a lot of I had a African American firefighter or police officer. I've heard that before, that the tests are not diverse enough, you might would say, or to do. But then I had several officers tell me this, like they felt that was kind of a smack in the face to say, don't give me a dumbed down version of the test. So don't give me something different from what you give someone else. I should be able to pass this test if I put the work in. I should be able to do this. And this was like 3 officers that I was talking to, because I was hearing that in the streets that the test is not is inclusive enough, maybe, I don't know the word, to other people. But these officers told me, like, no, don't say that. Don't do that. We don't want a champion for that. So why would you give me something different? So
Absolutely, because the approach that, well, let me say this. So the testing that we do, it's valid. There's validity to it. Now, how we prepare and how we prepare the community or anyone interested in law enforcement for those, there's probably some opportunity that we could, for outreach that we can do. But in terms of us being able to attract the right demographic, or I say the much broader demographics that we're wanting to bring into the city, more work needs to be done there, because obviously when I start thinking about recruitment, there's ways that we can do that, but some of that's going to take us really getting out in the community and finding different ways to make this an attractive profession for others. And then when we do so, I know that we have the academy that was just mentioned, but for those that are already adults, there could be possibly the ways that we could do that to help prepare people for that test so that they can be more competitive, and hopefully we'll be able to increase the number of candidates coming into the pool. But until we do that, I think we're going to still have this problem, but I think it's a multifaceted process that we have to undertake.
Let me add also, Chief Fletcher changed that process when he got here. That was one of the first things he did as far as our recruiting division goes. The written test that is administered now is the Nelson-Denny comprehension, the reading comprehension test. I believe it's the same one that is used to gain admittance or your placement at Chattanooga State. And I think the test is actually administered at Chattanooga State. There are practice tests that you can take online. And we encourage the applicants to do that when we come across their applications. And the PT test has been changed as well, and there are actually videos on the city's website that shows how to perform those particular physical tasks in order to pass the test, if that helps.
Is that it? Councilman Gilbert? Cut it back off? Okay. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you very much for your report and all that you're doing. We're excited, so keep on moving forward, and anything that we can do to help the human resource experience great for all our employees, please bring it to us.
Okay, will do. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure. Okay, with that being said, we have concluded this part of the agenda session. Now we'll turn it over to Public Works and Transportation Chair Mitchell.
Can I get approval of the minutes? I think that was a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. We're going to start with Public Works today.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, Justin, how you
Council
doing?
members.
Would you please read 7C?
A resolution authorizing the approval of change order number 1, final for Curl Construction and Excavating LLC of Wartrace, Tennessee, relative to contract number W12018-201 Agawilla Drive Stream Restoration Project for a decreased amount of $75,534.21 to release the contingency amount of $90,000 for a revised contract amount of $824,086.79.
I don't see any lights, but Justin, this wraps up the restoration project?
Yes, sir. This was a stream restoration project that was part of the consent decree. As part of the consent decree, the Public Works Department undertook a stream, we call it scary banks. So the stream previously was being undermined, and a lot of sediment was eroding from the banks when high velocity of water came through that area. So it's now a beautiful restored stream all the way from Aguela Drive to South Chickamauga Creek.
Okay. Councilman, you okay with this? It was 7C, the first one, Aguela. Have you been over there? To see?
Yeah, this is a closeout of the project at Aguela Drive, the stream restoration project, as part of a consent decree project that we agreed to do as an environmental display of stream restoration. So it was to, if you look from Aguela Drive to South Chickamauga Creek, it's probably about 1,000 feet, maybe more, of stream restoration, where we laid the banks of the stream back, installed vegetation, and also slowed that water down all the way to South Chickamauga Creek, reducing the amount of sediment that enters South Chickamauga Creek from Aguela Drive.
When you're saying slow down, you don't mean just like slowing the water really down. You mean that you made it more open, to my knowledge, you made it more open so that things can go through without having obstacles in their way, like trees or whatever. So now it can kind of flow where it won't bag up and just keep flowing, correct?
So there's several parts to the project. One was to reduce the amount of sediment that was entering South Chickamauga Creek by installing vegetation. The banks of the stream are actually opened up, so there is much less vegetation impeding the flow, but it also slows the water down, widens the flow out to create much less velocity that prevents the erosion from happening in that stream.
Plus it'll absorb more, correct?
It
'Cause you got
does.
plenty-
So
okay.
it's meant to both slow the water down and to clean
And absorb.
the water. Yes, sir.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you please read 7D?
A resolution authorizing the approval of change order number 2, final for Lane Inliner LLC of Orleans, Indiana, relative to contract number W12028-201, rehabilitation of Dobbs Branch 3 Subbasin, a consent decree related project for a decreased amount of $148,850.25 to release the contingency amount of $40,000 for a revised contract amount of $2,991,489.04.
Don't see any lights. Okay, let's move on to E then.
A resolution authorizing the approval of change order number 1, final for Thomas Brothers Construction Company Incorporated of Hickson, Tennessee, relative to contract number S11001-201, Highland Park, Anderson Avenue, Green Infrastructure Demonstration Project, a consent decree related project for a decreased amount of $112,172.42 to release the contingency amount of $76,527.50 for a revised contract amount of $1,801,008.06.
Don't see any lights, but you're obviously getting some work finished.
So, yes, sir, both of these projects are related to the consent decree. They're both in lieu of penalties to the EPA as part of the settlement from the city of Chattanooga. Through the consent decree program, this green infrastructure demonstration project is along Anderson Avenue in both districts 8 and 9. It's a beautiful installation of streetscape, also pervious pavers, pervious asphalt. We recently had a demonstration there with a media day. It is a beautiful project if you haven't been through there. It's also an educational opportunity for developers, the community, and the people that live around that area. Thanks to Councilman Byrd for attending the grand opening, so to speak, of that project when it was finalized, but happy to have both of these projects completed.
You happy? Okay. I like that. All right, thank you. Please read F.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to accept a donation from the North Chickamauga Creek Conservancy for the purchase and installation of historical signage from the Snipeman Cabin within Greenway Farm Park for an amount not to exceed $1,100.
Don't see any lights. Councilman Smith, you okay? Absolutely. Great. That's all for Public Works. Before I let you go, I have a question. I've heard a couple of council people speaking about with we've gotten you to put consent decree on different resolutions. And I thought I heard a question, and I don't know if you've been approached about this yet or not, but when it's a stormwater project, have you been approached about attaching that from a stormwater fund?
I have not, Mr. Chairman. We would be happy to do that. That would be easy for us.
Would that be okay with council? Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, council members.
Well, oh, long lost Blythe Bailey. Hey, Mr. Bailey, how you doing?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Good to see you. I believe we're going to start with G, transportation.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Transportation to enter into a partnership agreement with Lawson Electric Company Incorporated, project number T18001-811 for the Walnut Street Hotel located at 102 Walnut Street, and to accept a contribution of $20,237.84 towards the cost of 8 pedestrian light poles, luminaries, conduits, and installation.
I have no questions on that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to H.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Transportation to enter into a partnership agreement with Seaford Investments LLC, project number T18001-812 for the Moxie Hotel located at 1220 King Street, and to accept a contribution of $17,708.11 towards the cost of 7 pedestrian light poles, luminaries, conduits, and installation.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Are
Councilman
these
Byrd.
the little acorn lights that go on the street?
Yes, sir.
That's what they are.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Please read I.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Transportation to enter into a partnership agreement with Adaman Electric Company Incorporated, project number T18001-810 for Erlanger Children's Hospital Outpatient Center located at 900 East 3rd Street, and to accept a contribution of $30,356.76 towards the cost of 12 pedestrian light poles, luminaries, conduits, and installation.
You okay? All right. J, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Transportation to renew contract number T16002-201 with REMAC Incorporated and Jarrett Builders Incorporated, citywide crack seal and bitumosin surface treatment, and to enter into 2 one-year blanket contracts for crack seal services for both professional firms for an estimated amount of $150,000.
Okay, I see no lights. We're going to move on to ordinance on first reading, July 31st. Would you please read 6D?
An ordinance closing and abandoning a portion of the 200 block of Delawana Terrace to allow for construction of a future development as detailed on the attached map, subject to certain conditions.
All right, please read E.
An ordinance closing and abandoning the unopened and unnamed right-of-way between the 4300 block of Guild Trail and the 4300 block of Ox Highway to allow for construction of a retaining wall and adjustment of property lines as detailed on the attached map, subject to certain conditions.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Blight, give me a little detail about that, please.
I'd be happy to. This one actually is one that I will remember for a while. This is an unopened right of way, and typically, we generally don't recommend that they be closed simply because they can provide future connectivity. That was our initial recommendation, and the individual made a really strong case, including taking a video of the existing right of way and walking us through the current characteristics of this right-of-way. It ends on its uphill side at Ox Highway, which doesn't have any pedestrian infrastructure. It's too steep for any sort of right-of-way use for vehicular use. And so we felt like after he provided all that extra information, it was a reasonable request. He's already gotten a temporary use, and he wants to have the right-of-way be abandoned so he can help stabilize some of the slopes for his driveway that he's built in his house.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right. Now we'll move on to resolutions. 7F, please.
A resolution authorizing Ortwin Signs, care of Jim Teal, acting as agent on behalf of applicant Seth Bigham, to use temporarily the right-of-way located over the western face of the building located at 60 North Market Street for the purpose of installing a projecting sign as shown on the maps attached hereto and made a part hereof by reference subject to certain conditions.
Sounds fine to me. All right, Mr. Bailey, are you prepared to talk to us about food trucks?
I am.
All right, have at it.
I may just stay on this slide and provide, this is the third time I've been in front of you all to talk about this ordinance. So let me go back just a little bit, and I'll get into some of the changes that have been made since I believe I was last in front of you about this potential ordinance on May 29th. Initially, it was a CDOT-led effort because the current city code does not provide for the current city code prohibits food trucks from operating on public city streets. And so we worked with the city attorney's office to develop some code changes that would permit food trucks to operate on city streets. And in the process of doing that, there were some questions from members of this body as well as others about how to maybe facilitate food trucks being used in other places like public properties on YFD centers and public parks. So we've taken a couple of stabs at what we think is a right balance between some concerns that have been expressed about vendors on the sides of streets, nuisances to residential properties, limits, and kind of understanding how this is going to work and balancing those concerns with trying to facilitate this operation. And from our standpoint, we think that food trucks provide a dynamic on the street that makes streets more comfortable. If people are coming and going, the more things they have to do, the more comfortable generally the streets can feel. So that was the intent of the proposed ordinance. We've really only made one change that's substantial from the last time that I was in front of you, and that is due to some concerns about some of those concerns that I mentioned, some potential nuisances for residences that are nearby, and also not wanting to encourage vendors that aren't food trucks, but vendors that might get confused by this ordinance. We've put in the ordinance that you will have in front of you next week, and I have a limited number of copies for what the draft is now, if anybody wants a hand copy today, to limit the zone within which food trucks can operate on public properties to the short-term vacation rental zone. And I don't know what Keith, tell me if there's a better word for it, but we established a zone with short-term vacation rental that includes Lookout Valley to the west.
It's the same zone, but we are now calling the food,
Okay, yeah. So the map is the
whatever,
same.
mobile unit.
And now I'll flip around so you can see it.
So it's the overlay.
So this is the zone as shown on City GIS. The to the left of your screen, to the west is Lookout Valley. Excludes Lookout Mountain, of course, not being in Chattanooga. Includes St. Elmo and Alton Park and East Lake and Clifton Hills all the way to Missionary Ridge. It goes up to Crest Road and a little bit beyond, and then up towards the north. Includes Glass Street all the way up to, on the North Shore, all the way up to, I believe that's Lupton City, there in the very top right corner, and the North Shore down below. So this zone has been added to the ordinance as a way to restrict those locations that can operate without a mobile food truck zone on public property, be that YFD centers or parks. So there's basically three things. I'll try to lay out how this will work. On city streets, what we've been talking about each time that I've come before you is a mobile food unit zone permit, which anyone can apply for. They come to CDOT, they use an application form that looks like, oh, shoot. We have an application form that's one page. That the hard part of the form is that you have to define an affected area, which is essentially 1 block or 500 feet bigger than the zone that you're trying to establish. And then within that zone, you have to list the property owners and show that 75% are in approval. And that's geared towards making sure that that the food truck zone doesn't cannibalize existing brick and mortar restaurants, and that everyone in the vicinity is generally in favor of the food truck zone. That's citywide to be able to do food trucks on street parking spaces on city streets. Now, of course, streets like Brainerd Road, Hicks and Pike don't have on-street parking, so those wouldn't be eligible to be food truck zones to be able to be served by on-street parking. Public spaces, parks and YFD, what we brought before you on May 29th was that there was a permit process and a reservation process that both departments can use to accommodate food trucks on those properties. I think they would normally be in the parking lots of parks and YFD centers. And both departments were involved in this process and were willing to use those existing permitting processes to allow food trucks to operate on the YFD centers and the parks without a food truck zone being established. We still have that, but only in this area. So the only permit that's required to go park a food truck at a YFD center or a park within this zone is the permit that department would administer. And they have the discretion to limit them based on their existing vendor or limit them based on their existing usage of their neighborhood and however they wish within that department. Outside this zone, it could still happen, but it would have to be through a food truck zone with the 75% petition. So that's basically the change. It limits the use of food trucks without the 75% approval to within this zone, and I think hopefully resolve some of the concerns that were voiced a month and a half ago and gets us closer to a good ordinance that can allow these things to operate. I'd be happy to go into any of the other changes that I have on some of these slides that I've outlined here, if anybody still has questions about any of those things, or maybe just take general questions.
Yeah, I got a question from Councilman Gilbert.
I think also that you will allow, if they get a application, that you will let us, for as a council person in that district, to know that someone is applying so that we can
I heard-
charm in.
Thank you. I'm glad you asked that. Yes, we have a checkbox on the application that indicates that they have notified the council person. And of course, they could be dishonest. Staff will check up and make sure that the council members are aware of these zone applications.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Bailey? If not, I have two. Explain to me how River Street's gonna work
River Street?
with the parking spaces on River Street and property owners. Now, is that the property owners that live in the apartments? Is that the property owners that, I mean, I guess they're not the owners, are they? Because they live in the apartments and they're renting. How exactly is that going to work?
Well, this is the first time I've been asked that question. River Street being, perhaps you may know, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Bergdahl or Mr. Holland, what the limit of the park is and what the limit of the right-of-way is. I assume River Street is a right-of-way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a street, it's a city
Okay.
street, and of course, you know, as far as the parking places, they're all along River Street
Okay.
that starts
So
at
I
Tremont
I think,
and wraps all the way past the carousel.
yep, I think that would work actually really well based on how we've set this up. That being a city street would require a food truck, what's called a mobile food unit zone. And so that mobile food unit zone would have to be applied for, and someone would have to want it, whether that be a food truck vendor or a business owner or a neighborhood advocate that wants to see food trucks on River Street, and they would come to us, and our application does say come to CDOT first because we have the authority to change the affected area. It's a rule of thumb that the zone they're trying to establish, that add a block on each side, and that's your affected area, but we may need to make sure that would be a good case, I think, where we would want to make sure that all the properties on Fraser were within the affected area. So we wouldn't give a food zone we wouldn't give a mobile food unit zone permit unless the application showed 75% approval. And so if there is 75% approval, then I think it's fair to assume that the businesses and property owners in the vicinity would be favorable to food trucks operating there.
Okay, so if there's 75% approval, is that approval of property owners or business owners? Because everybody's renting
It's
down there.
property owners, and that's 6-1, half a dozen. I think we felt like property owners would advocate for their tenants' interests, and it would be easier from an administrative standpoint to verify property ownership and property names rather than businesses, which fluctuate more than property ownership.
Okay. Second question. Did I hear you correctly say that the department, when it comes to youth and family development centers, parking lots, and food trucks going into them, if it's in this zone, did I hear you correctly saying the department, it's youth and family development, will make those decisions?
Correct.
So Uncle Willie's going to get a food truck in the parking lot of a youth and family development center? Well, I'm just saying that it just feels to me like that's putting potentially pressure on youth and family development.
Oh, I see. Okay, so Greta was involved, and she's, I think, on vacation or out of town today, so wasn't able to be here. But Greta and Jason, we spoke with Greta Hayes and Jason McKinney.
If you don't think, if you've gone through this process more than we have, obviously, if you don't feel there's a potential conflict of interest through that decision-making process, I'm fine with it.
I think I don't, but what I was going to say was that I think they need to develop, and I think they're willing to do so and plan to do so, develop their own criteria for how they say yes and no. So they don't get into something where people are accusing them of favoritism or whatever. Okay. And they've got issues. Sometimes some of the YFT centers, as I understand, have their own vendors, and so they need to balance all that. And I understood that Greta and Jason were going to be working on a policy, so they had a objective way to determine yes or no.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
Again, it's the one that we usually ask, how does enforcement work?
Complaint driven, I think. I'm trying to imagine the scenarios.
So
you had
there's
mentioned
one where it shouldn't be, let's say. And a lot of times they're on weekends where
Yeah.
there's nobody to enforce. So it gets reported, and then what happens?
It's in the ordinance, and Keith may be able to speak to this. There's a fine, I believe, a $50 fine, and then there's
Is it
a
the city court $50 fine?
city court. And there's also one, I think the one that has the sharper teeth is I believe it says in here, 3 offenses, and the food truck can lose their food truck license, which would mean they would not be able to operate in the city
So
at
that
all.
means city court needs to have 3 separate findings.
Am I getting that right, Keith? Or yeah. Each occurrence of a violation shall be a separate offense, and after 3 violations will result in revocation of the mobile food unit permit.
All right, Keith, I guess it's you. Is it 3 separate violations, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? That's 3 violations? Or 3? How does that
We're going to
work?
have to see how it works out. Frankly, we have similar types of things in the special gathering permit. If you recall, the only real sanction we have is that if you've had 2 violations against you, you can't get another special gathering permit for a year. In those cases, we've been doing each one individually. So somebody had 2 parties back to back, they've got 2 of them. So that ended them. So I guess we would be consistent on this as well.
So, all right, but for each one of those special event things, they really are special permits. With this, once I get a permit, it's mine to lose. So it's not 3 special permits. I'm just asking for, we do a lot of these things. I'm trying to figure out how we plan on enforcing them.
Well, it's the 3 discrete violations. I think Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is 3
Is
Discrete
3 discrete?
violations.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Is there going to be a process where we have to approve some form of fees or something like that if we're licensing food trucks to be places? And are we going to charge and?
It's been 6 weeks since I talked to Greta about the fees. I think they have fees already set up that are going to be applicable to this. I
Okay.
believe Parks is the same way with the permitting system that you're developing. Our fees are, there's a $110 fee, which is the same thing as the temp use fee, which is in the ordinance for the mobile food unit zone permit. And then in addition to that, there's a fee already established for reserving on-street parking spaces. It's generally about $15 a day, which is equivalent to the parking revenue
fees.
from the meter.
Yeah. So Mr. Attorney, we're not going to need, as a council, to approve these?
There are fees originally,
Okay.
otherwise no.
Okay. All right.
And if I can go back to Councilman Burris, the ordinance actually says Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is three different violations. It doesn't say it in those words, but the way I wrote it, that's what it says.
When are we going to see this on our agenda?
I have it on the 3-week outlook, so
Okay.
unless there's major objections, I would be inclined to work with Keith and make sure we finalize any last-minute changes, any detailed changes, and submit it for August the 7th was what I was planning.
Everybody feel all right about that? Okay, we'll be voting on August the 7th then.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I don't see any other lights, and I don't have any more business, and I think that's the end of the agenda session, isn't it? Right now? Okay, we'll be back for the council session at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Well, the only time we do 3 is if, what is the rule on 3 o'clock public comment? I know there is.
I think we waived the rules to let people do it. Because I think,
I thought we came up with something like, got on the agenda and it didn't.
hey, do I look like a chairman?
You're, that's one thing.